This envelope sat in my kitchen drawer from June 14th, 1972, until last Tuesday. I never opened it. 6 days after it arrived, two Marines came to my front door, and I decided whatever my little brother had written belonged to a better man than me. I am 88 years old, and last week I finally broke the seal. My name is Walter Garrison. I grew up in Braddock, Pennsylvania, when the mill kept the town fed. In the fall of 1971, I was 34, married to June, working at Rousseau's garage, and trying to build something with my kid brother, Danny. Danny was 19 and better with engines than I ever was. Fast hands, sharp grin, no patience for fools. We kept our future in a blue Folgers can on the office shelf. $1,842, all saved to open Garrison Brothers Auto. Danny liked the red version of the sign. Said red made people trust a mechanic. What I remember most from that year is the weight of a letter never sent. The apology I kept putting off before there was even a letter to answer. My mother, Eleanor, collapsed in September. June drove her to St. Francis in Pittsburgh. The doctor said she needed surgery. The hospital wanted a deposit. I had $214. We had $1,842 in a blue Folgers can on a shelf at the garage. I took every dollar. Danny found out 3 days later. I left the hospital receipt in my coat pocket, and he saw it when he came by the house. He walked into June's kitchen, holding the receipt in one hand and the empty can in the other. He said, "Tell me you didn't touch it." I said, "I'll put it back." "You didn't ask me," he said. "There wasn't time." There was time to tell me. June dried her hands on a dish towel and said, "Walter," I said, "your mother was in a hospital bed." Danny leaned over the table and said, "She's my mother too." 2 days later, he came home with a Marine recruiter pamphlet in his back pocket. He dropped it on the table. June said, "Danny, don't do something stupid because you're angry." He looked at me and said, "Maybe I'm tired of waiting for this town to decide what I get to become." I said, "You don't join the Marines to prove a point." He said, "No. You join because a signing bonus is one of the only ways left to rebuild your future after your own brother spends it." On October 3rd, 1971, I drove him to the recruiting office in East Liberty because our father was drunk and our mother was still recovering. Danny carried one duffel bag and the red cardboard sign folded in half. Halfway there, he rolled down the window and said, "If I come back, I am not working under somebody else's name." I said, "You come back first." He nodded once. "You say that like you mean it." That was the last honest thing he said to my face. The first letter came from Barris Island in November. Mostly jokes. He said the coffee tasted like wet nails and one drill instructor sounded like a chainsaw arguing with God. I almost wrote back. The second letter came from Camp Pendleton in March 1972. He asked about our mother. He asked whether June still made peach pie better than any bakery on Braddock Avenue. At the bottom, he wrote, "You can still tell me the truth, Walt." I did not answer that one either. June said, "Pride is just grief that refuses to sit down." I said, "I'm not proud," she said. "Then what exactly are you practicing so hard?" By June, he was in Vietnam, near Quang Tri, The envelope arrived on June 14th, 1972. Thin blue airmail. My name in his handwriting. The kitchen was hot. June was making tomato sandwiches. Michael was 8 and driving matchbox cars along the baseboard. I held the envelope and thought about the apology I still had not sent. June said, "Open it." I put it in the drawer and said, "After dinner." 6 days later, 2 Marines walked up our front steps in dress uniform. Danny was dead at 20. I never opened the envelope. I told myself if there was anger in it, I deserved it. So I left it in the drawer. Years passed. June and I raised Michael and our daughter Teresa. I became foreman after Russo had his stroke. My father died without apologizing. My mother died without knowing why Danny and I had stopped writing. Michael had a son named Luke. He had Danny's hands. He loved guitars the way Danny loved engines. Michael wanted business school, steady work, and no surprises. On Thanksgiving in 2024, they fought in my dining room. Michael said, "Music is not a plan." Luke said, "Maybe your plan is just fear with the tie on." Then Michael said, "As long as you live under my name, you'll do this the right way." That was my father. That was me. Luke left before pie. Michael left an hour later. 3 months passed. No calls, no apology. Last Tuesday, Luke came by to pick up an old harmony guitar I had promised him. He asked, "Grandpa, did Dad always sound that certain when he was wrong?" I said, "Yes." He laughed once. "Must be genetic." I opened the drawer, looking for guitar picks, and my hand stopped on the envelope. "What's that?" he asked. "A 52-year delay," I said. So I told him everything. The money, the fight, the Marines at the door. When I finished, Luke said, "Then open it." I said, "Not today." He said, "Grandpa, silence doesn't keep the peace. It keeps the wound warm." So I got my pocket knife from the coffee tin by the stove. My fingers were shaking. I slid the blade under the flap and opened the envelope. "Walt, if this gets to you before I do, quit being an idiot and read the whole thing. I was angry when I left. Not because you used the money, because you thought you had to hide it from me. I saw Mars Hospital bracelet in your coat pocket that night. I knew." I kept reading. "I would have given every dollar in that can. What scared me was watching you turn into Dad, one careful sentence at a time. If I come home, we fix cars. If I don't live like a man waiting to be sentenced. If you ever have a son, tell him the truth while your voice still works." I sat down so hard the chair scraped across the linoleum. Luke was crying. For 52 years, I expected blame. What Danny gave me was permission to stop hiding. I thought guilt was something you carried. Turns out, it's something that carries you. I asked Luke for my phone. Michael answered on the 4th ring. He said, "Dad." I said, "Listen carefully and do not interrupt. Your Uncle Danny died at 20. And I have been making that loss worse for years by keeping my mouth shut. You call your son tonight. You tell him the truth before pride turns into family tradition." He was quiet for a second, then asked, "What truth?" I looked at Danny's letter in my hand. I said, "That you are scared, that you love him, that those are not the same thing. Here is what 88 years taught me. Silence is not dignity. Silence is debt, and it collects from your children. If there is a name sitting in your throat tonight, do not give it another 50 years.